Midterm Elections 2022. It's the halfway point of President Biden's current and first term in office. Voters cast ballots shaping Congress and the future of his legislative agenda. Did Republicans sweep to power, or did Democrats fare better than expected? Our election experts explain the results. Now, on the Inside Story, Midterm Elections 2022.
Hi, I'm Katherine Gibson, VOA's congressional correspondent. There was a time when Election Day meant just that. Everyone who wanted to vote took off from work, lined up outside the local school or church, and voted on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Now, Election Day is a deadline to get your ballot postmarked or dropped off, avoiding the lines or bad weather or not being able to take time off from work. More early voting and vote by mail has resulted in higher voter turnout. One drawback, instead of knowing most of the results on election night, it's taking days to know the outcome of the 2022 midterm elections. What we know right now is the conventional political wisdom that Republicans would win by large margins in many parts of the country and take control of Congress did not play out. Instead, Democrats have held on to the U.S. Senate, holding a one-seat advantage with one more seat to be determined next month. And in the House, Republicans have won control, but will likely have just a single-digit majority like the Democrats have had for the past 2 years. New members of Congress already arriving in Washington, even as votes in some races are still being counted. Republicans are expected to win a very narrow majority in the U.S. House of Representatives.
I think we're going to get very close in the House, but I think it's going to be very close, but I don't think we're going to make it.
But Democrats won key races across the country, preventing an expected Republican red wave, often defeating candidates handpicked to run by former President Donald Trump.
The message was pretty simple in our race. Folks rejected far-right extremists.
Republican Representative Kevin McCarthy will likely become the next Speaker of the House.
Yes, I'm fully in support of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. I think he's done a great job as a Republican leader.
And in the Senate, Mitch McConnell will remain minority leader after Democrats won close races in Nevada.
I will always fight for you.
And in Arizona, where Democrat Mark Kelly said a defense of abortion rights was a key part of Democrats' success.
For the Arizona women who have spent months making it loud and clear that they will not stand for having their fundamental right to an abortion taken away.
Kelly's opponent, one of several Trump-endorsed Senate candidates who lost their races.
We won because the American people rejected the kinds of autocracy that the MAGA Republicans, a wing of that party, was talking about.
If Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock wins the December 6 runoff against Republican challenger Herschel Walker, Democrats will hold a 51-49 majority in the U.S. Senate. If Warnock loses, Vice President Kamala Harris, a Democrat, will have the tie-breaking vote in a 50-50 Senate. Joining me now is Chief National Correspondent Steve Herman, who was with voters during this election season. Steve, what did you hear from voters out in the field that showed up in the results on election night?
Well, Catherine, what we really heard from voters across the country is they were really sort of fed up with losing, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, and became much more pragmatic, rejected the extreme candidates, extreme positions, and really felt like they wanted to see their politicians be able to get things done.
I certainly heard that from voters too when I was out in the field in Georgia talking at, Republican rallies, Democrat rallies. That was across the board. Were there any specific issues that people brought up to you?
Well, certainly economy, I think, for both Democrats and Republicans was a big issue. And Democrats actually felt that the Biden administration was doing pretty good, where Republicans felt that Congress and the Biden administration were really responsible for the higher prices that they were seeing at the supermarkets and at the petrol pumps. Also, for a lot of Democrats, was this abortion issue, the Supreme Court decision. Now, a lot of the political analysts thought that this would sort of fade by the time of Election Day. But we have to remember, in a lot of places, people vote early, quite early.
That's right.
And so it was still fresh on the minds of many of the voters.
You know, both of us were in these key states, Pennsylvania for you, Georgia for me, that were really key in deciding the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. The voters that I spoke to definitely had that at the top of their minds as to whether they really needed to see Republicans come into power as a balance to Joe Biden. Did you find that too?
Yes, but I think also in a place like Pennsylvania, it was unique. Down in Georgia, you had some very nationally focused races. Right. In Pennsylvania, we had a Senate race between two unconventional politicians, I would say. John Fetterman, the Democrat, who's the lieutenant governor, but of a huge physical presence, and a guy who wears short pants and casual clothing year-round. And Dr. Mehmet Oz, who is a professional TV talk show host who was painted as a carpetbagger, which means someone who's come from another place. And that really worked against him. And the Fetterman campaign hammered away, painting this guy as an outsider. He was supported by Trump, but he definitely wasn't an extreme candidate, as was the Republican gubernatorial candidate who also lost. So for the Republicans to get boxed down in Pennsylvania like that was really remarkable.
You bring up a great point about how the political is always personal, you know, John Fetterman's outfits, all of that kind of stuff. Down in Georgia, we had Herschel Walker, who of course used to be a very big football star.
Legend, yes.
And that actually makes a difference with voters when you talk to them. They really weigh that in some of their decision making. Something that also weighs into the decision-making of voters in midterm elections is the first 2 years of a presidency. It's kind of a midterm report card on how a president is doing. Were voters talking to you about that as well? What did they think of Joe Biden?
Well, Democrats are fairly happy with him, feel he hasn't done too badly. He is not a very popular president, we have to say, and so there were these expectations, especially from the analysts, that there would be, as Barack Obama put it after his first midterms, a shellacking. And so the Democrats are happy because they didn't get beaten as badly as they thought. They've retained the U.S. Senate. The Republicans are unhappy because they didn't get the Senate as they were led to believe they would. And the margin is much closer in the House. But that is certainly a victory for the Republicans as expected. But what this means is it makes President Biden's next 2 years really tough as far as getting anything through this building behind us right here.
Yeah, we're going to have an interesting time of it for the next 2 years up there. Despite the pleadings of many prominent Republicans, Donald Trump confirmed his plans to seek the party's presidential nomination in 2024.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Many Republicans blame the ex-president for the party's underperformance in the midterms, and many of Trump's endorsed candidates lost, prompting questions about how tight his grip is on the party. VOA's Mike O'Sullivan looks at the MAGA report card from Los Angeles.
The writer and venture capitalist J.D. Vance, endorsed by Trump, was the projected winner of a Senate seat in Ohio over Democrat Tim Ryan. But in Pennsylvania, Democrat Josh Shapiro took the governor's seat over Trump-backed candidate Doug Mastriano. New Hampshire Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan beat back a challenge from Trump-backed Don Bolduc, who conceded Tuesday night.
And I'm honored to have had the opportunity to represent the Republican Party in the U.S. Senate race here in New Hampshire.
In the closely watched Pennsylvania Senate race, Republican Mehmet Oz, a celebrity doctor endorsed by Trump, lost to Democrat John Fetterman, who got help on the campaign trail from former President Barack Obama and President Joe Biden. Arizona is another contested state where Trump-backed Kari Lake battled Democrat Katie Hobbs for the governorship. Trump-supported Blake Masters sought the Arizona Senate seat held by former astronaut Mark Kelly, a Democrat. Some polling stations in the Southwest experienced problems, including in Phoenix.
People will go and they try and run the ballot through this tabulator. Maybe 1 out of every 5 or so of those ballots, they're not going through.
He said those ballots will be counted by hand, something Republican Kari Lake found suspicious. 2 Republicans who have frosty relations with Trump nevertheless won re-election: Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire and Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia. Trump supported an unsuccessful Republican primary challenge to Kemp, who angered the former president by rejecting the unfounded claim that Trump won Georgia in the last election. Among other races still to be decided as of Wednesday morning, the governor's race in Michigan, where incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer faced Trump-backed Tudor Dixon, and the Senate race in Georgia, where the incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock faced former football star Herschel Walker, endorsed by Trump. The vote count will determine the composition of Congress and the future direction of both parties. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News.
Assurances of election integrity came from the Department of Homeland Security the day after the polls closed. DHS officials said there's been no evidence of any deleted, lost, changed, or compromised voting systems. But there is a battle going on against election disinformation on several fronts. From San Francisco, VOA's Silicon Valley Bureau Chief Michelle Quinn takes us inside the information war.
For most of 2022, senior intelligence analyst Brian Liston noted it was quiet on fake U.S. social media accounts believed to be from Russia. That changed in August as the U.S. midterm elections approached.
We saw these accounts beginning to spin up, talking about election fraud, or that the election was going to be fraudulent vote, with ballot stuffing and things like that, or Democrats were going to try to steal the election. As we see
Liston is among a network of researchers, cybersecurity experts, government agencies, and others that comb through social media, websites, state media, and law enforcement announcements to track coordinated disinformation campaigns stemming from U.S. adversaries, such as Russia, China, and Iran. Fake news sites by organizations associated with these governments promote divisive stories about America that are then promoted by fake social media personas pretending to be Americans. Russian operatives sow division that the voting system can't be trusted, Liston said. Chinese operatives highlight the volume of online anxiety about the integrity of the vote as evidence that American democracy is not working. In the southwestern state of Arizona, mathematician Dylan Murphy said he worries about the real-world consequences of online misinformation.
My concern is that foreign actors can spread disinformation and conspiracy theories through social media and kind of pit Americans against each other in a way they wouldn't be left to their own devices.
Arizona was a big part of electoral challenges to the presidential election 2 years ago, with a Republican recount of results in Maricopa County, ultimately confirming a Joe Biden win. Many Donald Trump supporters continue to say that election was stolen, among them Arizona Republican candidate for governor Kari Lake. For this year's midterm elections, Maricopa County elections officials took many precautions to protect the ballots and the counting process, they say. The ballot tabulation machines were not connected to the internet. They live stream voters delivering ballots to drop boxes and ballots being counted.
In addition to physical security, we also have security over the ballots and over the process with bipartisan boards, political party observers, and checks throughout the process to make sure that each ballot is accounted for and only valid ballots are counted.
Arizona voter Miriam Mitchell says the peaceful transfer of power is important.
Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Sometimes we don't win and we felt that they should have won. But we still follow the democratic process. We hand over the torch like we're supposed to. That's the only thing that's great about America is our democratic process, and we need to hold on to that.
It remains to be seen if candidates and voters accept the results. Michelle Quinn, VOA News, Phoenix, Arizona.
While the founders of the United States established a separation between church and state, religious identity has always been a part of how the political parties try to woo voters. But some politicians and other leaders are promoting the idea of connecting them, giving Americans a country run with morals based on Christianity. VOA's senior Washington correspondent Carolyn Presutti went to Manheim, Pennsylvania to take us into the contentious debate.
I'm Pastor Mark Burns, and I am here to declare war on every race-baiting Democrat.
This is the cry of Christian nationalists looking to frame the midterms. Mainly white Christian Republicans attending the Reawaken America tour, which is part rally and part revival.
As I feel the Holy Spirit come down, giving Jesus a standing ovation.
We got God out of our country, and this is what you get, and we got to put him back.
The Reawaken tour has visited 16 cities in the past year and a half. Thousands attend, and tickets typically sell out.
America's General Michael Flynn!
The organizer and star of the tour, retired General Michael Flynn, former national security advisor to former President Donald Trump.
Do you believe in the separation of church and state?
I think that that's a great constitutional argument, and I just think that is it in the Constitution somewhere?
The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution prohibits the government from establishing a religion, which has been upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court as a separation of church and state. Flynn and the attendees disagree and ask,
they love their faith and they love their country. So what's wrong with that?
Christian nationalism is the single greatest threat to democracy.
Some Christians take offense at the movement.
No. I believe in spreading Christianity, in spreading the gospel, but that's not the same as America being a Christian nation. America must be a nation where Christians and Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and atheists can all learn to live together.
Public opinion shows a variety of views on Christian nationalism. A Pew Research survey says nearly half think the U.S. should be a Christian nation. But 3 out of 4 don't want churches endorsing candidates or discussing politics. And a 538 poll says more than half want the government to enforce the separation of church and state.
When people say you shouldn't be preaching politics from your pulpit, that is ridiculous.
Back on the stage, Reverend Bill Cook had pastors take an oath to preach one election sermon before every election, and to teach Christians of their sacred duty to vote for godly candidates, which, according to attorney Stephanie Robbins, is probably illegal because of a church's tax-exempt status.
There's going to be an opinion on most godly candidate, and that's going to be, depending on the church, a particular person most likely, and I'm relatively certain that they'd know who they're talking about. So yeah, I mean, that's going to cross the line at some point.
A group called Christians Against Christian Nationalism is urging its podcast listeners to speak out against the ideology.
Christian nationalism says that Christianity should be privileged above other religions, and that conflicts with our call to love our neighbors as ourselves.
Reawaken Tour organizers say the midterms won't stop the rallies, and they will continue to promote Christian candidates through the next general election in 2024.
Jesus is my savior. Donald Trump is my president.
Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Manheim, Pennsylvania.
Several weeks ago, the Republican leader of the House of Representatives, if Republicans retake Congress, said there would be, quote, no blank check, an unlimited money supply to support Ukraine against Russia's attacks. With a likely divided Congress for the next couple of years, Ukrainians are worried about America's future support. With reporting from Warsaw and Kiev, VOA Eastern European Bureau Chief Miroslava Gongadze explains the concern.
On the streets of Kyiv, people worry not only about Russia's next attack, but also about how the U.S. midterm elections will affect support for Ukraine. Ukrainian officials and citizens hope no matter who takes control of Congress, that U.S. aid for Ukraine will continue. Mykola Davydiuk is a political analyst based in Kyiv.
We don't have some favorites or we don't have the party which we would like to win. Our main reason to continue our partnership in Ukraine, to receive some weapons, money, political support, geopolitical support, diplomatical support.
He emphasizes that for Ukraine, having the U.S. as a stable partner is crucial. And Davydiuk says he believes remarks by both Republicans and Democrats questioning America's approach toward Ukraine is more about campaigning rhetoric than U.S. policy shifts.
I'm more than convinced that the support will remain in because we are not only good friends. We are really big partners which have common values. We are both on the side of Western democracy and fighting against autocracy and dictatorship.
Davydiuk's colleagues see potential issue with continued support from the U.S. However,
we can face a problem if a Republican majority emphasizes their opposition and takes a more critical look at the budget proposals of the Biden administration. As they have already said, no more blank checks. They will try to have more control over the budget process and control the spending.
According to the Kyle Institute's Ukraine support tracker, the U.S. total commitment in military, financial, and humanitarian aid for Ukraine exceed $52 billion. European Union countries and institutions have committed over $29 billion. Ukrainians on the street of Kyiv consider the U.S. support of Ukraine critical and voice hope for a firm U.S. commitment to Ukraine and its effort to win and recover from the war.
I think the support will continue. It is really needed, and I think they understand that.
I am worried. I would like the support to continue. We will win faster if they support us. We would like the forces who support Ukraine to win and continue to support us, not only during the war.
I hope the support will continue. If not, we will win on our own anyway.
Miroslava Gongadze, VOA News, Warsaw, Kyiv.
That's all for now. Stay up to date with all the news at voanews.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News. You can also follow me on Twitter at KGYP. Catch up on past episodes at our free streaming service, VOA Plus. For all of those behind the scenes who brought you today's show, I'm Katherine Gypson. We'll see you next week for the Inside Story.